Hello and welcome to the Osceola's Between the Hashes, where Osceola football analyst Mark Salva, managing editor Bob Ferrante, and I take a look at some quick hitters coming out of Saturday night scrimmage for the Florida State football team. We want to take a look at three things. First of all, number one, head coach Mike Norvell's reaction to the scrimmage, and then, of course, that of his coordinators, offensive coordinator Kenny Dillingham and defensive coordinator Adam Fuller. And then we want to get into a little bit more conversation about the battle for the starting quarterback position at Florida State, which looks like it's down to a two-man race. But first of all, guys, let's go back to Saturday night. We saw some frustration from the head coach and the offensive coordinator, and even some from Adam Fuller. But the first takeaway from Coach Norvell coming out of Saturday night's second scrimmage for his Seminoles was the fact that the offense struggled mightily against a defense that was dominant for most of the night. And kind of want to get you guys, Mark, start with your take on, him saying that it was, again, a dominant defense and the offense really struggled to get in any kind of rhythm. This was a second scrimmage. It was a little bit more of a game time atmosphere than it was situational. They were letting the ball play where it lied. So if it was 1st and 10 followed by a 3-yard loss, it was 2nd and 13. It wasn't a down and distance situation all the time. But Martin, just kind of talk about what you thought of Coach Norvell's opening statement.
Yeah, I wasn't at all surprised that the defense would be further along than the offense. I hear his comments, and my first thought is the nature of defense versus the nature of offense. On offense, rarely do you have a good play if there's a blown assignment or a missed throw or something goes awry at one position. Offense, you have to be totally coordinated. Everybody has to be on point in order for a play to be well executed. And oftentimes if that doesn't happen, you're going to get behind the chains. And I think we're all too familiar with that. Defense is a different animal. Defense, if a guy misses an assignment, misses a gap, misses a coverage, unless the offense is targeting that area, it may not manifest in anything. In fact, a lot of times, what could be frustrating as an offensive coach is that you tell your guys that the defense is going to be in a certain place in a certain way, and they don't react the way they should, and they blow an assignment, and some guys sometimes fall into stuff. But that's just the nature of offense versus defense. An offense that executes at a high level would eventually take advantage of those kinds of mistakes on defense. So it's not at all surprising. I think it also speaks to where the defense is in relative to the offense in terms of personnel and who they are and the way things lay out. I mean, and we'll probably talk about it when we talk about the coordinator's comments, but I just think the defense is just further along all around in terms of putting pieces in place, what they want to do, and establishing a baseline than the offense is. Well,
we've talked before about the fact that typically early in spring practice and in camp, the defense is usually ahead of the offense because there's, you're just reacting on defense. You're not having to run the spots. You're not having to worry about protections, that kind of thing. But one of the things that Coach Norvell did mention that it was a combination of both mental mistakes by the offense and physical mistakes where they were just beat by their man. Bob, were you surprised by anything that you heard from Coach Norvell in his opening comments on Saturday night?
I think that was what concerned me, the negative plays that followed successful plays. And this is a team that's had a trend of having pre-snap penalties, missed assignments on the offensive line. It's been a big issue in 2018 and 19. We thought the new coaching staff would maybe be able to clean that up, and probably a mix of players and coaches who are to point at for that kind of execution problems. So I'm concerned about negative plays for sure. The other one that hit me with Norvell is he called out the leadership of the offense. And when you're doing that after a scrimmage, that's a big one. That's one where you start to question, who are your leaders? Why aren't they speaking up and saying the right things when things aren't going well? That's when leadership is turned to. And you look at a guy like James Blackman. Is he doing it? You look at a guy like Jashaun Corbin. He's only been on campus 8 months. Does he feel comfortable doing that or not? Are there guys on the offensive line who are stepping up? Are receivers doing it? So when I hear a coach question that, it's a big red flag for me, more than the defense was dominant, because of course the defense is dominant. They're one of the best defensive lines in the nation, and they're expected to be. So those were two of the big things for me. Again, leadership and those backwards plays.
Hey, Mark, let me ask you a question. Coach Norvell has mentioned a couple of the freshman offensive linemen, Robert Scott and Thomas Schrader, several times, including today after his Monday press conference. But let me ask you this. When you take into account his comment about leadership, which obviously is aimed at the older kids, and you've got at least 3 senior offensive linemen competing for playing time and a junior quarterback, can you marry those quotes together and say he is sending a message to the older guys saying, hey, guys, if you don't lead, I'm going to put some young guys in there and give them a chance to grow up?
Norvell has maintained from the time he stepped on campus that this is going to be a culture of accountability and performance. If he is to hold true to his word and keep his credibility, he has to react, and he has to act on what the results are on the field. If the offense is going up there and not executing, not doing what they're supposed to do, and there's a lack of leadership. I mean, the best thing you can have on a football team is that the players correct each other, is that the players hold each other accountable. That's, you have a bad play, a guy goes, my bad. Well, the next thing coming out of a leader's mouth is it's not okay. Quit saying my bad. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've seen that happen, on a team that has strong leadership. Is one thing to be encouraging, it's another thing to hold people accountable. And so I don't think it's any secret that on offense, we probably lack a little bit of that. And I can definitely say that now. If there are younger players that are upholding the standard of performance, that empowers them to actually be leaders. Everybody always talks about the when the start of the dynasty with the 85 class, and of course I'm a little partial to the 84 class myself, but that was one thing that helped establish the culture that we have, is that I think our 2 classes, these group of guys really competed hard, but we held each other accountable. Guys like obviously Dion and Dedrick Dodge and the defensive lineman, our offensive lineman, we held each other accountable. If that's not happening, that's got to be corrected quick. And if it's a younger guy, so be it.
Yeah, now another thing that Coach Norvell mentioned after the scrimmage on Saturday night was that he thought there was some miscommunication that caused some problems, and I believe he was referencing the offense specifically when he made that comment. Is that something that, Bob, you would anticipate being cleaned up just because of the lack of time they've had on the practice field?
I think it's fair to expect that's a byproduct of you get 3 out of 15 practices in the spring, and you're still kind of getting to know the guys next to you. There's so many different pieces, 8 new assistant coaches. I think on the offensive and defensive side, I think both coordinators have discussed how that kind of game day communication from the box to the sideline, from the sideline to the field, various things could be cleaned up. I think Fuller was disappointed with scrimmage 1 in that regard, very happy with scrimmage 2. So it is going to take time. That's why you hold scrimmages, I think, for the coaches too, to work through a lot of those kinks.
Yeah, and his overall impressions with the quarter, he didn't say anything glowing. He said that he thought that James and Tate, who got the majority of the workload because obviously Chubb is out and Jordan Travis missed his second scrimmage in a row. He said they're progressing, but nothing glowing about them. Mark, what was your takeaway from what he said about the quarterbacks? And we'll get into a little bit more of that here as we go.
Yeah. The quarterbacks are it's probably a function of the overall offense. I mean, I think number one, a new system, new playbook going live against the defense. And like I said earlier, when things break down, it sometimes can be hard to evaluate a quarterback when there's a free runner coming at him. Sometimes it's hard to evaluate a quarterback if the receiver breaks a route off at the wrong time, or it could be hard. With the best you can do is you get a clean pocket, everything's good. Then you see, can a guy make a throw under those circumstances? And then, how does he handle duress? I think the big thing for us is, at this point, which quarterbacks are leading, which quarterbacks are taking a bad situation and not making it worse and then making it better. In the fact that, Dopey seems to be really excited, about anything that's going on in that position right now, I think speaks volumes to kind of where we are. Honestly, and we'll talk about, I saw Coach Dillingham's remarks and his body language, and it just, I recognize that look. I've been in many scrimmages like that, where you come out of it and you're like, what am I going to do? Where are we? I think maybe a little reality hit in terms of where we are realistically in terms of talent level. And I think that all of that is a reflection of the mood after the scrimmage.
Yeah, and, he did not have, unlike Coach Norvell, he did not have the solace of being able to talk about what a great job the defense did. And Mike did have that chance to, forget about the offense. And, there was definitely a noticeable difference in Dillingham's demeanor when he came into the room, the way he addressed the media. One of the things he says is we just have to get better as a whole. It wasn't good enough tonight offensively. Like I said, we put ourselves in bad situations. You can't do that versus a good defense. You can't do that versus anybody. You put yourself behind the sticks all night, and it's very, very difficult to be successful. He was clearly frustrated, was not happy at all. Just, Bob, what was your takeaway from Kenny?
Watching Kenny, the body language was definitely a wow, because that's a guy who's typically kind of an Energizer bunny and very excited and happy and thrilled with what's going on. And instead there was none of that. There was no poker face. It was all bad. He wore it, and every question was kind of rough to listen to. I think what concerns me is, college football doesn't have a preseason. But when you look at it, your scrimmages should be a preseason game. That should be where players take what they've learned on the field throughout the week into Saturday when you're inside the stadium and the lights are on, and they should stand out or not. And coaches, same thing. I think Fuller, it was discussed that Fuller might have brought a few more exotic blitzes or a few more things that he had up his sleeve. Wasn't so vanilla. Well, yeah, that's what he's going to do. That's his job to do it. That's what he's paid to do. And the offense needs to expect that they're not going to see vanilla. And there are times where Mickey Andrews is going to want to bust Mark Richt, and Mark Richt is going to want to bust Mickey Andrews. And that's what these two coordinators are trying to do. That's what makes good teams really good. And right now, I think Florida State has a really good defense and just some pieces of a really good offense. And just the pieces aren't there. To Mark's point, is it the quarterback, is it the offensive line? End of the day, it's probably a little bit of both, probably a lot of both, and leadership. So I think just the fact that you have battles on Friday, well, that's good to hear. But to not have a good battle 2 straight Saturdays in a scrimmage, yes, the defense is going to be ahead, but the offense isn't maybe rising as much as we want to see them rise.
Yeah, and yeah. I'll just say this. So it really speaks to where we are as a team overall. Again, I think the defense is much more settled. We know a defensive line is good. Pieces are in place. And it's like that, I think, at all levels. They pretty much have a good idea. Offensively, we have no idea. We're still trying to find our 5 best offensive linemen. We haven't even settled on that yet. We're still trying to figure out what can our personnel do. And I think Coach Dillingham had a great quote in there talking about exactly that. Until we won't know the ceiling of this team offensively until we know what everybody can do. And I think, to my point earlier, I think maybe a little reality hit that we're not the most talented offense, regardless of how well we execute. You know, what's the ceiling of this offense? It may not be as high as we had hoped, you know, and so, but it still can be good. We still have talent in certain spots, and that's the job as coaches, is to identify where are we good, what can our guys do, and how can we get matchups to enable to win football games, and who are the players that give us the best chance to win football games. It's not always talent, it's dependability, right? When I call a play, I need to be sure that it's going to be executed a certain way. It is my job to know that we can do that. And so, you know, again, Coach Bowden, I always quote Coach Bowden. I guess there's a good reason for that. Coach Bowden always said the greatest ability is dependability, you know. And right now, you know, I remember we'd sit in meeting rooms and Coach Bowden would, you know, we'd just go down the list and he'd say, you know, is this guy a winner or not? And by that he meant, can we depend on him in the hard times, you know? And I think if you go down our offense, I don't think we know who those people are yet.
Well, there was a couple of good things that had come out of it offensively. Coach Dillingham had mentioned prior or post scrimmage 1 that they did not own the football. They did own the football in scrimmage 2. They had 1 turnover on what seems to be an interception. He mentioned that it was a drop pass or a pass that was deflected. So they had over 100 scrimmage snaps, 1 offensive turnover. There was a block kick, but that doesn't count against the offense from a scrimmage standpoint anyway. So we did get to see a little bit of that they're taking care of the balls a little bit better, whether it's quarterback, running backs, receivers. So they did make a little bit of progression. He also said that they're a little bit closer to coming up with their offensive line rotation. So there were some positives that came out of it, but what you did not hear and what we've heard just about every post-practice or post-scrimmage report, there was no talk of the running back. So you would have to think that means they had a hard time getting anything going offensively on the offensive line. Now, I think we're all in agreement that they probably are not going to – every week is not going to be a defense as talented as Florida State's. And now, listen, Florida State has a long way to go to live up to the ability that we think they have on defense. They were not particularly great last year with a lot of the same personnel. But new system, new coaches, we all think that that's going to be a positive. But any positives that you guys are taking away from the offense coming out of Saturday night?
Yeah, that's a tough one, right? I mean, I don't think there was, you know, to your point, you're not turning it over, so you're not putting your defense in a bad position. That's a positive. It sounds like Coach Norvell tried to backtrack a little bit today in what he said about the quarterbacks, that they did some good things and wanted to have some plays back. I think there's not a whole lot there for us to chew on because he's just not giving us very much. But I think taking care of the football is something that Coach Dillingham has stressed since day one. I think he commented on that back in the spring. You know, in the spring there were too many turnovers, too many, you know, we put the ball on the ground type of plays. So that's definitely a positive. You know, again, at the end of the day, I don't worry about the running backs. It's the one position on this offense that I don't have any concerns. All the others, you have definite question marks.
Yeah. So let me say this from my experience. Like I said, I've had scrimmage days, and it's usually about the second scrimmage where you come out of a scrimmage and you're just holding your head like Kenny Dillingham is doing. Okay. Here's what I know. It's never as bad as it seems. It's never as good as it seems. All right. When you come out of that situation and you couldn't pee a drop, and you go back and you look at the film and you say, you know what? We are this close. If we would have got this, it would have happened. Hey, look, this guy did something really good here. You know, you find things that you say, okay, I can work with that. And I think probably what happened is that after he did that press conference, they all probably went and watched the film. And, you know, it probably was like, you know what, there's some things here we can build on. That's what my experience tells me. And I'm sure that's probably what's going to happen. And so you find those things, again, you find those things that you know, do what the dog can do, who can do what. And you probably got closer to that after you looked at that film. So without being all doom and gloom on the offense, I will say this, they're going to figure it out. I think they're smart guys. You know, the job is to win football games. And the way we may have to win football games is the things that we can control best is don't turn the ball over, which is a point of emphasis, and that came out as a positive. We can execute, at a high level once, everybody knows what to do, because they're still not there yet. And we can control attitude and effort, right? And if we do those things, we can be a productive offense. We have some playmakers. We have guys that can make big plays, but we also can control the things that really have been shooting us in the foot, and that's execution, pre-snap penalties, and attitude and effort. We can control that. Now, you couple that with a really good defense and a sound kicking game, and it sounds like we might have a really good kicking game, that's a recipe to win a lot of football games. There have been national championships won on less, right? And I'll say this too. I'd much rather have a strong defense and a, middling of the road offense than have a great offense and a defense that struggles. Right?
Well, and moving over to the defensive side of the ball, we spoke with Adam Fuller Saturday night, and obviously Coach Norvell was had very high praise for a position that we thought was going to be pretty good, which was a defensive line, the front four. He's mentioned Kando and J-Rob and Josh Griffiths and Derek McClendon and Fabian Lovett and Robert Cooper, and you had a lot of the same names echoed by Fuller that Norvell had mentioned. So again, going back to what I said earlier, there may not be as many good defenses that Florida State's offense is, but Florida State's defense still has to live up to its potential, because we're coming off of 2019 where they were playing in a system they were not comfortable with. But Bob, I'll start with you. They're back in a 4-3. We've got glowing reports about the front four and the three linebacker spots. Kind of what's your takeaway from Adam Fuller coming out of Saturday night scrimmage?
It sounds like everything that Josh Kando has done this preseason has been incredibly positive. And again, to have that kind of high-end pass rusher off the edge who can push the pocket, they haven't had that since Brian Burns a couple of years ago. So that's huge to have a guy like that. Haven't heard as much about J-Rob, so I think it's still a question of, is he the guy over there, or do you look to a freshman or sophomore, redshirt freshman type of guy there? But I think we know this interior, the defensive line, is as talented as Florida State has had in a long, long time. I mean, from top to bottom, those are guys who you feel confident you can depend on them on Saturdays. The linebackers, I think the praise for the freshmen has been really interesting here too, because you've got, leaders like an Emmett Rice and a Leonard Warner, but then you've got some younger guys like, Steven Dix, and Fuller just talks about Dix and his instincts, that the guy can kind of see a play developing and knows what to do. And I think for a freshman to be able to do that and have the confidence to then go ahead and do it, that says a lot. So I think the front seven, you feel a lot better about it. If this linebacker group takes a step forward, just a step, and you get enough of a pass rush, it makes your secondary's job so much easier. I think we all feel that the defense is really going to be significantly better this year.
Let me ask Mark. He's mentioned, I think they know what they have in Marvin Wilson, obviously, and I'm sure some of why we're not hearing his name as much is they're probably limited in his reps in practice. But we've heard a lot about Robert Cooper, not so much about Corey Durden, and we've heard a lot about Fabian Lovett. How do you read the tea leaves in their interior defensive tackle spots, Mark?
Well, regardless, I think, knowing Odell and knowing what we like to do, we're going to play all those guys anyways. Now, to your point, it seems like Cooper losing the weight has really elevated his game. He was a load and hard to block and athletic, even at 380 pounds or whatever he was. And him at 330, which is still a massive human, if he's even more athletic, I can see where he would be a guy that'd be really, really, really hard to block. So I don't think it's an indictment so much on those other guys as it is as how much Cooper has gotten better as a result of his conditioning.
Yeah, another thing that he mentioned, before I forget, I just want to mention it, but Adam Fuller, the first thing he talked about post-scrimmage was the fact that their communications as a coaching staff was much better because if I believe I'm describing this accurately, they're in a game day setup where they got some coaches in the press box and some coaches on the field. As a new staff, Mark, which you've been a part of a new staff before, explain to our listeners and viewers why it is so important to get that communication down in these early scrimmages.
Well, I mean, you've got obviously a new staff, new situation going on. Some guys have worked together before, most haven't. And so the importance of getting guys on and off the field, a change in personnel, who's communicating the change in the offensive personnel group to the field. So now we can communicate the change in our defensive personnel group to get them on the field. Who's telling what personnel group to go on the field? What are the hand signals to do that? How's it being communicated between the players? All of that stuff, the logistics of all of that has to be done in the snap of a finger, right? And so ironing that stuff out is real important. And understanding each other's communication style and the mechanics of all of that. We always had, it was always the scrimmage before we went into game prep mode, and we would do a dry run of a game. In other words, the players would come in at the time that they'd have to come in. They'd get dressed, taped, do the warm up exactly like you would in a game. The coaches would do everything exactly like they would in a game. They'd be in the box with the headphones. All the communication would be the same. And you do a dry run before a game just to identify any problem areas and where things might need to be ironed out. It doesn't sound like, because of the compressed schedule that we have and the lack of spring practice, we're having to combine two things in one, where we have preseason and spring practice, married up together here. And so I think it's really smart of them to try to get ahead of it and try to identify some of these gaps and these problem areas well before the week before the first game. I think it's very smart.
Yeah, I think we've also got a little bit of that maybe Adam Fuller has a little bit of Belichick in him. He wears the cutoff hoodie like Belichick does. And then we got a little bit into, this is going back to the first week. We had so many pre-snap issues last week. We were inconsistent with our blocking structure and our hand placement. We didn't chase the ball with the greatest angles. We had less missed tackles tonight, being this past Saturday night. But it's hard. We're not tackling the quarterback. We call sacks, and we're a yard away from him. This is when I got this little Belichick or Nick Saban type of rat poison thing. Does he break the tackle and throw the ball downfield? Nobody knows. It's a scrimmage. So I think that maybe Adam is one of those guys who's going to be more negative or more – maybe negative is not the right word, but maybe not be so complimentary when his team is playing well, and maybe a guy that tries to build them up when they're playing bad. Is your take on some of his comments in general?
Well, that's the way it should be, honestly. The nature of a young man, is I've arrived. I can't tell you how many times I say, "Oh, you think you've arrived, huh?" You got to keep them on edge. You got to keep pushing. It's the job of the coach to strain the potential of every player. And, there's always room to improve. And that's the attitude you have to have if you're going to get better incrementally every day. I think I saw Odell quote telling his guys, if you just get 1% better every day, it'll add up. Over the course of a week, over the course of several weeks, months, in a season, you become that much better of a player. So yeah, he has to be that way.
Yeah, he actually went on to say these things are set up for the defense to be in a good position.
Well,
so
I maintain all drills are tilted towards the defense, and that's the way I like it as an offensive guy. I want them to have
I think
advantage.
he was trying to keep. Yeah, I think he was trying to keep their confidence in check, but he did follow that up by saying our guys played really hard tonight. We had great energy and passion, and he said that was the thing I think I was proudest about, and also that if you're on the field, you're a starter. So whether you're running out with the first group or second group, it really doesn't matter. If you're on the field, you're a starter because we're counting on you. I do want to we're going to bypass the linebackers for this particular segment because we're going to come back with our podcast on Wednesday and preview the linebacker position. But we did learn some things today, or something today, that I think is important. And Bob and I kind of came away with the same take. And Coach Norvell's Monday press conference, he was asked some follow-up questions this Saturday night. One of them was about Jordan Travis. and how he looked at quarterback. And what we learned is that Jordan Travis was held out for the second consecutive scrimmage, which means he's been out of practice at least 8 days. We don't know if it's undisclosed reason, injury, could be something else. We're not sure. But I say all that to say this. Florida State now finds itself in a two-man quarterback race to figure out who's going to start against Georgia Tech on September 12th. Chuba Purdy is out. We get some different information. His mom says 6 to 8 weeks. Mike Norvell says, well, they got a good progress report after the surgery, so who knows. Jordan has missed 2 scrimmages. Mark, your take on it? It's a two-man race between Tate and James.
Yeah. So that doesn't – I mean, having 2 quarterbacks makes everybody nervous. I'm sure Jordan will be back, so we'll have 3. I think probably every one of them, we're going to have to lean on them at some point during the season. I don't think there's any question. History, especially in the past few years, have shown us every one of those guys is going to have to be asked to contribute or even win the game. So I think it's obvious that James has the most experience, and he's going to be given every opportunity to win the game, to win the job. And it's up to him, incumbent upon him to grab hold of it and take charge of that. But as a coach, you have to give your team the best chance to win. And if it's a freshman gives you the best chance to win, like Tate, so be it. Because the players depend on you to put them in a position to win at every position. And, you know, if he gives you the best chance to win, you got to go with him. So what's my take? My take is it's still up in the air. I think it's encouraging that the freshman is even in the mix and is not just, you know, peeing all over himself. It looks like he's competing. And to me, that's a positive thing.
Bob, your take on it being down to a two-man race?
I think the big question that we have is, can Tate stay composed when everything's flying around and that offensive line is going to have some breakdowns, and it's going to be a challenging first start, even though it's just Georgia Tech and it is a home game. It's still an ACC team. It's still going to be a tough competition. I think if you feel like Tate can do it and he can lead and the offense is going to move forward and not move backwards, and you feel like he's level-headed and the emotion of the moment won't get to him, you go for it. But right now it's your job as a coach, I think, to prepare both of them and to have a plan. Plan A might be James Blackman. Plan B might be Tate Rodemaker. And you execute the plan based on whichever quarterback you choose that day. Maybe you're playing both of them, and not to start a quarterback controversy there, because your team needs to know clearly who your starter is. But you have to figure that out too within a game situation. And we kind of know what James can do. We just don't know what he can do within this offense. Is he capable of settling in and being a rhythm passer? We just don't know that. But
all right,
that Tate is this close, I mean, it says a lot about him that he's gotten this far, and he's clearly, this sounds like it's a 1 and a 1A type of thing right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a 1 and 1A thing. I think probably Tate's probably a little bit closer than what we even realize. But he's gotten a lot more reps because of Chuba and Jordan being out. And I got a question for both of you. I think we all expect that obviously Jordan Travis will be back, but this is a system that none of the quarterbacks have had a lot of time in, and now Jordan has missed up to 8 practices. I do think we'll see Jordan in the season, but I think this will even – does this limit what you're able to do with Jordan, because he has missed what has been the bulk of at least half of the preseason?
I think he'll catch up fast. I think because of the limited numbers we have at quarterback, when he does come back, he's probably going to get a lot of reps, you know. And again, you know, we can limit what we do. You know, we talked earlier about having a Jordan Travis package, you know, doing things that he can do well, and having that in the game plans. we're going to, like I said before, we're going to need him at some point. So I would expect that even though he's missed 8 practices, he's probably a little behind. You can still take mental reps regardless of where the problem lies. He can be watching film. He can be communicating. He can be getting mental reps, so to speak. Although that's no replacement for actually going out and doing it with the teammates and having the stuff flying around you, obviously. But I have a feeling he's an older guy. He's been in it. He's played. I have a feeling he'll catch it relatively quick.
Bob, any thoughts on Jordan as the season progresses?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Short term, you maybe have some short yardage packages for him, maybe goal line. I think that's pretty dynamic. If your goal is to get it in the end zone, and that's what everybody does to win the game, and not settle for a field goal, then Jordan on some kind of option or play action or rollout, whatever. That's a pretty lethal thing to have down there in a tight space. Yeah, I think he's behind as far as catching up from a starting standpoint, but from a usage standpoint, I think Florida State should use all 4 of them this year. I think you should not plan to redshirt anybody. You can play up to 4 games without penalty. Why not go for it?
But now you can play all the games without penalty.
and who knows how this is all going to play out, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
So, the rules are out the window in 2020 with the quarterbacks. I think you're looking for the guy at that moment who can win you a game, but also you're developing, and you can only develop by putting a guy on the field. You've got to be developing for 2021 too. I think that's really important looking forward.
Yeah, well, it's certainly going to be interesting to see how this thing plays out as they get closer to September 12th. And then obviously they've got an open week right after the first game. So I think that we're likely to see multiple quarterbacks against Georgia Tech. It will be interesting to see what they do with Chubba once he is regained 100% health. But never a dull moment in 2020 surrounding any football team, particularly this one. But, guys, I want to thank you for joining me as we take our listeners and viewers between the hashes at Florida State, and look forward to getting back on Zoom with you guys on Wednesday and breaking down our linebacker group and offensive line group for our continued preseason preview of each position group as Florida State heads into what is going to be a 10-game league schedule. They've also added Jacksonville State of Alabama for October 3rd. So we do have 11 games. But, guys, appreciate your time and look forward to talking to you soon.
See you Wednesday.